Thank you. I guess that now we can move on to Ian. Sorry, no glasses, no sight. Ian Conlon.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you can hear me okay. I'm Ian Conlon, so I'm representing today Europe's Rail Joint Undertaking. I'm the head of what's called the system pillar within the joint undertaking. I'll explain a little bit about that. Three things that I'll cover today: a little bit of background on the joint undertaking itself, the standardization and TSI input plan, which is an output which the sector will be receiving in the coming months, and a little bit of discussion on the system pillar itself and the goals for it with relevance to the conference here. So first of all, the joint undertaking itself. So Alice explained the policy context at a European level for rail. The joint undertaking is one of the mechanisms to support that. So the joint undertaking was set up on the basis of a legal act in 2021. It's the follow-up to Shift to Rail, which I guess you're all aware of. And it's a 1.2 billion program, split 50% funding from the Union, from the member states via the Commission, and 50% from the members of the joint undertaking, so a wide mix of suppliers, infrastructure managers, etc. Within the European rail ecosystem. There are three main elements within the joint undertaking itself. So the first is, on the diagram here, you see the innovation pillar. So this is, in a way of thinking about it, the continuation of the activities of R&I as per the Shift to Rail program. Obviously updated, changed, and building on the Shift to Rail program, but it's the R&I basis of the work that is done within the JU, and it has the bulk of the resource. And at the moment it's split into five key areas, which you can see listed on the right. So the first is the European Rail Traffic and Mobility Management. The second is on the CCS side, so digitalization and automation of train operations. So for example here, ATO GOA4, or absolute safe train positioning, the introduction of satellite, etc. into the system. The third area is on sustainable and digital assets. The fourth highlighted here is on the competitive and digital freight. So the main core of that work being on the digital automated coupling. There is a lot of work, Molly will discuss it in a later session, being driven through the work of this particular work stream here. So it's a key output of the work of the JU. And the last element to highlight is on the regional rail services. So the point here is to take the solutions that are being proposed in the other areas in particular, and given the different characteristics for other areas of the network outside of the core network or high density lines, applying it to regional or low density services so that we are covering, if you like, the whole of the network in terms of the solutions being produced. So this is the core of the program. It's structured in terms of calls and grants to consortia. So there were grants awarded in December last year. So the projects have now been running in effect for almost a year. And the budget allocated was around half of the overall 1.2 billion. So it's been front-loaded, and there is now a big focus and a big momentum in all of these areas, and all of these areas are clearly relevant in terms of outputs to the work that you're considering in your committees and the standardization processes. I'll come on to the system pillar a little bit later on a broad description, but what I want to mention here is it's a new element within the joint undertaking. And I think from your perspective, the point to understand about the system pillar is it's an attempt to bridge the R&I world with the standardization, with the specification, with the harmonization world in a more coordinated way. It has more functions than that, but I think from your perspective, that's the first thing to think about it. So there were, within Shift to Rail, activities along these lines, the standardization rolling development plan, these kind of things, where there was a move towards trying to make the sector aware of the work that was being done at European level on R&I into the overall standardization approach. It was identified that this should be broadened, and this is one of the roles of the system pillar. The third point I want to mention is the deployment group. So this is the third leg of the stool of the joint undertaking, and what this area of the joint undertaking is attempting to do is to bridge the R&I work into the implementation work. So the deployment group actually will begin probably early next year, focusing not so much on DAC, because that already has its own deployment program, so that is in effect already set up, but in other areas that the members and the sector will identify. And this is one thing I wanted to mention, just reflecting on the speeches from the beginning of the session. I think one issue that is useful to think about within the overall conference is the interaction of your work with the overall political environment for rail. So Elite has handled it at the moment, but there is a strong link. You have the technical work. This is absolutely essential. It's the fundamental part of the way that technologies are standardized and introduced into the rail system. But it is important to be aware that there is a big focus and a big link at a political level in terms of the promotion of rail at a European level. So, for example, on the DAC side, there is obviously a huge amount of work going on. There is a call from the sector that there is funding at European level. This funding will be considered not in this financial framework, but in the next financial framework. But it's a condition, I think, for the discussion to happen at European level, that there is a mature and demonstrated solution and the standards and the technical work having been completed. So the work that you're doing is not existing in a vacuum, very far from it. There is an overall political and funding and deployment environment that is essential to consider and be aware of. And at least in terms of the work of the joint undertaking, the deployment group is attempting to address some elements of that. Then I just want to come on to the standardization and TSI input plan. Essentially what we are looking to deliver at the joint undertaking level is an integrated picture of the outputs of the work from the joint undertaking in terms of the different harmonization channels, so into the technical specifications for interoperability, into the standardization work that you're addressing here, but also into other harmonization channels, in particular what are called system pillar documents. One has already been issued, so this is on the EU Links Baseline 2, the trackside asset specification. It was issued in June. So essentially we're dealing with the different levels of harmonization, and what we're trying to show is a complete and transparent view on all of those harmonization areas, what the JU will be addressing, both for to inform the sector in terms of what's coming up when, so that this can be planned, also relevant on your side in terms of future planning, but also to link into the processes at European level, so the mandate from the Commission to the agency on the revision to the TSI. This will be discussed in the next 6 months. So these inputs will be relevant to that discussion, and similarly the Commission request to the standardization bodies. So it's attempting to address in a coordinated way the outputs of the joint undertaking into those processes for to support you in your planning, but also the Commission, the agency, in terms of the issuance of mandates and recommendations. Essentially, this is saying what I've just said. Where we are in the process of this document is hopefully we will be in a position to issue the draft first version before the end of the year. There will then be a process of consultation and validation, and in the end a validation of the document of the System Pillar Steering Group in the first quarter of next year. And this then should be in time to inform the discussions as I say, for example, on the Commission mandate for the TSIs. Then the final bit of the presentation I just want to highlight is a little bit more detail on the system pillar and relevance to the ICT discussions today. So the first part that I mentioned was this, if you like, some resource to coordinate the outputs of the whole JU in terms of the potential needs, the potential requirements, the potential inputs into the different harmonization channels. But the purpose of the system pillar goes beyond that in terms of scope, especially in the CCS and TMS area. And here, the purpose of the system pillar work is to focus on the strategic vision for the evolution of the system, CCS, not the whole railway system, but focused on CCS, but based on ERTMS level 2 and above, but considering the whole system. So at the moment, in terms of European harmonization, at least in the TSIs, the European level harmonization is relatively limited. On the standard side, maybe a bit broader, but still not complete. But obviously CCS goes much beyond the ETCS interface, track-to-train, or the radio. There is, probably 60, 70, 80, even 85% of the total value of the system in terms of implementation by infrastructure managers and operators, in terms of the interlockings, in terms of the RBCs, in terms of other elements of the CCS work. So the goal of the system pillar here is to consider, for the deployment of systems ERTMS level 2 or above, are there elements at European level which should be harmonized or standardized further? And the answer is already yes, because prior to the system pillar being in existence, there were a number of initiatives already in place, Acora, RCA, Smart Rail, other initiatives which were, if you like, sectoral led. And what we are attempting to do within the system pillar is have an integrated approach for the sector as a whole, both on the railway side and the supplier side, to come to agreements on these very complicated and very large questions, for example, on the evolution of the interlocking in RBC. So the ambition here is to address these questions in a coordinated way. So there is a specific amount of resource, so 50 million, set up and a specific governance structure to address these questions. And essentially, these are the areas of focus, and this is my last slide. Essentially, what we are looking to focus on is, in particular, the interfaces highlighted in green. So, for example, on the bottom right, you see the interface between the traffic CS and the trackside assets. So here there is an issued specification, at least in terms of a system pillar document, addressing those which is already in use by infrastructure managers. But in all of the other areas, there is ongoing work to essentially produce harmonization documents, whether it be specification standards or system pillar documents in these areas, to in the end support the sector when there is an implementation and a move towards ERTMS level 2 implementation, that there are European products and solutions to support that implementation. So at the moment, for example, on the interlocking side, there is not such a European level product or solution. We are aiming to provide the specifications to support that implementation at European level. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ian. A very interesting presentation.